The chair beside my name stayed empty the entire afternoon. I noticed it the moment I walked into the auditorium. The way you notice a missing stair before your foot ever reaches it. A clean line of seats marked family. White cards tucked into the backs. My card was there. The space beside it wasn't filled. It never would be. I took my place anyway. The room smelled faintly of varnished wood and warm electronics. Rows of people murmured, shuffled programs, cleared throats. On the stage, the projection screen glowed, waiting. I laid my notes on my lap, smoothing the top page once, twice, the way I always did when I needed my hands to be busy so my face could stay still. I didn't check my phone. I already knew. I had learned years ago that waiting for them felt worse than certainty. Certainty, even when it hurt, had edges you could hold. As the first speaker was introduced, I looked again at the empty chair. It wasn't dramatic. No one else noticed. That was the thing about absence when it's familiar. It blends in. My name was printed in bold on the program. Alina Carter. The letters looked heavier than usual, like they were aware of what they represented. 8 years of work. 2 degrees stacked end to end. A defense scheduled months in advance. Reminders sent with the careful politeness of someone trained not to sound needy. I thought of the messages I'd sent. April 22nd, 3 p.m. Just a reminder. Hope you can make it. Let me know if you need parking info. Each one answered eventually. Not with questions, not with concern, with acknowledgments, thumbs up energy, the kind of replies that sound supportive until you realize they don't commit to anything. The lights dimmed. A faculty member stepped to the podium. Applause rippled through the room. I kept my gaze forward, posture straight, hands folded over my notes. This was not the first time I had sat alone in a room built for witnesses. I grew up learning how to disappear without leaving. In our house in Austin, noise meant importance. Noise meant something needed attention now. My brother Lucas had always been loud in the way that bent rooms around him. He didn't demand attention. He absorbed it. Doors slammed when he entered. Laughter followed. My mother, Marianne, moved faster when he called her name, heels clicking sharply across tile. My sister Sophie received a different kind of focus. Quieter, warmer. She didn't need to raise her voice. People leaned in when she spoke. Compliments gathered around her like dust in sunlight. I learned early where I fit. I cleaned my own messes, packed my own lunches, waited for conversations to end before speaking, then learned not to speak at all. Silence wasn't enforced. It was rewarded. The first time I noticed the pattern clearly, I was 12. Sophie had an art show at school. The gym was lined with easels and uneven rows of folding chairs. My mother hovered near Sophie's paintings, smiling for neighbors, brushing, imaginary lint from her sleeve. Compliments flowed. Cameras flashed. I stood near the back wall holding a certificate I'd received that morning for a regional science competition. I'd told my parents about it twice. They forgot. I hadn't reminded them a third time. "Hold your sister's jacket," my mother said, pressing the soft fabric into my hands without looking at me. I folded the certificate into my pocket. The paper crinkled, louder than I expected. No one heard it. From that day on, I stopped announcing things unless I had to. In high school, when my name was called at graduation, I scanned the crowd out of habit. 4 faces mattered. None were there. I sat down slowly, careful not to look around again. Later, I learned they'd stopped for coffee. College didn't change the pattern. It refined it. At Rice, I sent invitations weeks ahead for a departmental award ceremony. Sophie replied with a heart. Lucas left the message unread. My parents responded days later with, "We'll try." They didn't. That night, I ate takeout alone on the dorm steps. The award sat beside me, still in its envelope. I didn't open it until later, alone, like everything else. When I tried to say something once, years ago, my mother smiled and said, "Don't be dramatic, Elena." My father, Thomas, nodded without looking up from his phone. After that, my protest got shorter, then quieter, then they stopped. Back in the auditorium, the speaker transitioned to the next segment. My cue was coming. I felt it the way you feel weather change before the sky shows it. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't look. I knew exactly what it would say. "Where are you? We're all at Lucas's. Did you say 3 or 4 here?" They weren't confused. They had never been confused. 2 months earlier, Lucas had posted an invitation graphic for a spring barbecue. April 22nd, 1 year to 6:00 p.m. I'd stared at the screen until the pixels blurred. When I called him, he'd sounded genuinely surprised. "What time is your thing again?" he asked. 3, I said. "People can do both," he replied. "Just come after." Stanford Hall was an hour away. He knew that. He didn't care. I called my mother next. She laughed softly. "Honey, don't be dramatic. We'll work something out." They worked it out exactly the way they always did. The faculty members said my name. I stood. Applause filled the room, polite, professional. I walked to the front with measured steps, the way I always did when I needed to keep my body ahead of my thoughts. I defended 8 years of research to a room that didn't include the people who taught me what absence felt like. When it was over, when the words "Congratulations, Dr. Carter" echoed through the auditorium, something settled in my chest. Not pride, not relief. Recognition didn't hit the same when you learned to expect it only from strangers. That night, I sat alone in my apartment with the blinds half closed. The glow from my desk lamp fell across piles of papers, my laptop, the folded program from the ceremony. I smoothed the crease down the center one last time, then opened my laptop. I created a folder. I named it Transition. No emotion, no hesitation, just a folder. Inside it, I placed copies of everything that mattered: identification, financial statements, research files, contact lists. I made 2 spreadsheets, one mapping every account tied to my current name, another listing how each would change. It wasn't revenge, it was order. As midnight passed, the folder filled. The hum of the printer sounded steady, grounding. I didn't waver once. By the time I shut the laptop, the structure on my screen felt more solid than anything my family had ever offered me. I sat back and looked around the room. For the first time, the silence didn't feel like something I'd been left with. It felt like something I'd chosen. And in that choice, something shifted, quietly, permanently, toward a life that no longer waited for an empty chair to be filled. The first form printed at 6:14 a.m. The sound of the printer starting up cut through the apartment with a mechanical calm that felt almost comforting. No ceremony, no witnesses, just paper feeding forward, page by page, as if the machine understood the importance of moving steadily instead of dramatically. I stood in the kitchen barefoot, coffee cooling on the counter, watching my birth name appear at the top of the document. Elena Carter. It looked heavier than it used to, like a label that had carried more than it was designed for. I didn't rush. I never rushed important things anymore. I read each line carefully, highlighting instructions, initialing margins, aligning stacks with the edge of the counter until everything sat flush. Years of being overlooked had taught me precision. If no one else was going to keep track of me, I would. By the time the sun climbed high enough to touch the window, the folder labeled Transition held its first official documents. Not symbolic ones, legal ones. The petition for a name change sat on top. I didn't feel angry filling it out. I didn't feel sad. What I felt was something closer to relief, the kind that comes when you stop trying to fix a system that was never built to include you. I drove to the county courthouse mid-morning. The building was pale stone, quiet in a way that suggested permanence. Inside, a clerk slid a stack of forms toward me without looking up. "Fill these out," she said. I nodded, took a seat by the window, and began. Line by line, signature by signature, my new name settled into place. Elena Vale. It didn't feel like an escape. It felt like accuracy. When I handed the paperwork back, the clerk stamped the top page. The sound was sharp and final. "Processing takes a few weeks," she said. "That's fine," I replied. Outside, the air felt different, not celebratory, clearer. As if something unnecessary had been set down. I didn't tell my family. There was no announcement, no explanation. Silence wasn't avoidance anymore. It was efficiency. The next phase was quieter, but more extensive. I started with finances. I logged into every account tied to my old name, exported statements, saved confirmation numbers, created a map of dependencies. One spreadsheet tracked what needed to change immediately. Another listed what could wait. I worked methodically, the way I did with research. No emotion, just flow. Emails came in as I worked. From my mother, "We missed you last night. Call me." From Sophie, "You okay?" From Lucas, "You seriously didn't come after?" I archived them without opening. The messages weren't questions. They were attempts to reassert access. That afternoon, I created a new email address, clean, unlinked. I updated my contact information with the university, my research collaborators, the consulting firm that had extended an offer months earlier. I transferred files to a new cloud drive and deleted the old one. Every confirmation email felt like a small door closing. By evening, my digital life looked different. Not emptier, more intentional. The physical transition took longer. I boxed my apartment with care, books stacked evenly, clothes folded in long rows, frames turned face down, wrapped in paper. I worked late into the night, stopping only when my body told me it was time. My phone buzzed again, a voicemail from my father this time. "We need to talk," he said. "This silence isn't helping anyone." I listened once, then deleted it. The silence was doing exactly what it needed to do. Over the next week, I updated my driver's license, voter registration, medical records. I reassigned emergency contacts, closed the last account that carried the Carter name. Each task came with its own small sound: the click of a button, the tap of keys, the soft rip of an envelope. No one applauded. That was fine. When everything essential was complete, I turned my attention to the one decision I hadn't shared with anyone: the move. Portland had offered me something Austin never did: distance without hostility, space without explanation. A consulting role tied to my research, not my surname. I accepted the offer with a single email and booked a moving truck the same day. The drive north took 2 days, long stretches of highway, rest stops with flickering lights, radio static. I stopped only for gas and coffee. Each mile felt like dissolving thread, connections thinning behind me without snapping. Portland greeted me with gray skies and a soft drizzle. Perfect. My new apartment was small but bright, a narrow balcony overlooking a quiet street lined with trees. I carried boxes inside alone, stacking them near the window. The one labeled work came first. Inside were research papers, a notebook, and a single photograph of me and my grandmother taken years ago at a birthday dinner. No one else attended. I pinned it above my desk. The next morning, I walked into the consulting firm's office and introduced myself as Elena Vale. No one blinked. They shook my hand, showed me my desk, asked about my research, asked what I thought. No one compared me to a sibling. No one asked where my family was. In the evenings, I continued the work of separation. I replaced bank cards, updated insurance, filed follow-up paperwork. The approved name change notification arrived weeks later on a gray morning. I printed it and slipped it into a new folder labeled Identity. The paper was still warm. That afternoon, HR forwarded an email to my new inbox. Your listed emergency contact attempted access. Relationship could not be verified. The system locked them out automatically. I didn't respond. Another ripple came days later. The apartment manager from Austin left a voicemail on my work phone. Your family is asking for your forwarding address. We can't disclose it without consent. I never gave consent. The silence stretched, but this time it wasn't hollow. It was structural. I wasn't hiding. I was no longer searchable. By the end of the month, nothing official carried the Carter name. Licenses, accounts, records, all updated, all sealed. The life tied to my old name had ended without confrontation. The new one had already begun. And the most unexpected thing was how light everything felt once I stopped explaining my absence to people who never noticed my presence. The chapel smelled like lilies and old wood, the kind of quiet that carries history in its walls. I arrived early, as I always did now. Not because I was anxious, but because I preferred to enter rooms before they filled with expectation. The front doors were still open, letting in a thin ribbon of gray morning light. I took a program from the stack near the entrance and folded it once before sitting down in the second row. My name was printed clearly at the top, Evelyn Vale. The ink looked deliberate, permanent. I ran my thumb lightly over the letters, not out of sentiment, but recognition. This was the first public document where my name appeared without explanation, without apology. I looked to my left. The seat marked "Family" remained empty. The familiarity of that sight surprised me with how little it affected me now. Months ago, an empty chair could hollow out my chest. Today, it was just information. Data confirming a pattern I no longer needed to analyze. People began to arrive in small clusters. Soft voices, careful footsteps. The low rustle of coats being removed. I kept my gaze forward, hands folded loosely in my lap, the program resting against my knees. Then I felt it, a shift in the air. My mother's heels clicked against the chapel floor, sharp and unmistakable. She stopped short when she saw me. I didn't turn immediately. I didn't need to. Her presence had always announced itself loudly, even when her attention never did. "You changed your name." Her voice cut through the space, not loud, but sharp enough to slice silence cleanly in half. Every head turned. My father's hand tightened around the program he was holding. My sister Sophie froze mid-step. My brother Lucas stopped laughing near the doorway. His expression caught somewhere between confusion and disbelief. I turned then, slowly. "Yes," I said. It wasn't defensive. It wasn't triumphant. It was factual. My mother stared at the program in my hands, then back at my face. "You didn't tell us." "You didn't come," I replied. The words settled between us, heavy but undeniable. The chapel attendant cleared his throat gently and gestured for quiet. The service was about to begin. My mother's mouth opened, ready to argue, but she stopped herself. The performance instinct kicked in. This was a public place. She straightened her posture and took the empty seat beside me. Too late. Throughout the service, I felt their attention on me more than on the ceremony itself. My mother glanced at me repeatedly, her expression shifting through confusion, irritation, and something that looked dangerously close to fear. My father kept his eyes forward, jaw set. Sophie fidgeted with her hands. Lucas didn't look at me at all. When the final hymn ended, people stood slowly. Conversations began in hushed tones. Coats were gathered. The room exhaled. My mother followed me outside. "This isn't fair," she said quietly, her voice tight. "Families move past things. We made a mistake." I stopped beside my rental car and faced her. "You chose a barbecue over my doctorate," I said. "That wasn't a mistake. It was a priority." "That's not how it was," she insisted. "It is," I replied. "And now the systems I exist in only recognize people who show up." She frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said evenly, "you're not listed." Her face drained of color as understanding caught up. Court records, employment files, emergency contacts, digital identities. The quiet work I'd done months ago now stood between us, immovable. "You can't just erase us," she said. "I didn't erase you," I answered. "I removed myself." Sophie approached hesitantly. "You didn't have to go this far." "I didn't," I said. "I went where I was seen." Lucas remained near the chapel steps, arms crossed, silent for once. There was nothing he could say that would matter now. I got into the car and closed the door gently. Through the windshield, I watched them blur together, shapes without access, voices without leverage. The drive back to Portland felt different than the drive away from Austin months earlier. There was no unraveling now, only forward motion. Back in my apartment, the rain tapped softly against the windows. I hung my coat, placed my keys in their dish, and set the program on my desk beside my framed degree. 2 names, 2 lives. My phone buzzed. A message from my mother, then another, then calls, missed attempts piling up. Urgency replacing certainty. I turned the phone face down. Later that week, HR forwarded an email. "Your previous emergency contact attempted to update your records. Request denied." Another system holding the line. Then a voicemail from an unfamiliar number. "This is your apartment manager from Austin," the voice said. "Your family has been asking for your forwarding address. We cannot release that without your consent." I didn't respond. I powered on my old phone once, out of curiosity more than anything else. Dozens of missed calls, messages growing more frantic by the day. "You're blowing this out of proportion. You owe us an explanation. This silence is childish." I turned it off and placed it back in the drawer. Silence, I'd learned, frightened people who relied on noise to stay in control. Life settled into a rhythm after that. Mornings in Portland were gray and steady. I walked to work under low clouds, coffee warming my hands. At the office, my name appeared on project briefs, email signatures, reports. No one questioned it. No one asked for a backstory. In meetings, my ideas were discussed on their own merit, not compared, not diminished, just considered. Some evenings, I sat on the balcony, wrapped in a blanket, listening to the city hum. The rain traced clean lines down the railing. I thought about the empty chair at my defense, the one that had once felt like proof of my unimportance. Now it felt like a turning point. I didn't hate my family. Hatred requires weight, and I no longer carried theirs. What I felt was clarity. Boundaries aren't punishments. They're confirmations of where you finally learn to stand. When I signed my name now, Elena Vale, the silence that followed wasn't absence. It was ownership.